project which is called the Bitcoin Takeover magazine. If you haven't gotten your copy yet, when you go outside for lunch or whatever, when you go outside, there is a place where you can take a free copy. It's by virtue of Andre's and Christian's hard work. They were able to print about 200 copies, but I signed a number 70 of them. And just so you know, I get a remote, good. Last year I was here, and some of you were also here, and I gave away some magazines. Some people just left them at the lunch table, did not take them home with them. But I just want to let you know that this is worth like $100 since last year. There's a market for this. It's a first edition. And if you want to look at it as a collectible, then I guess you should take it and see what you can do with it in a few years. But that's not the point. And I'm going to get there. I don't want to foreshadow too much. But last year I made 8 editions of the magazines that were launched here in Mallorca. And I changed the cover. I made sure that each one of them is unique in its own way. And some of the famous hodlers, so if I go back, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th edition, TabConf 2021 in Atlanta, Georgia. I was able to get one in the hands of this guy. If you don't know who he is, check peterwillyfacts.com. He's like the Chuck Norris of Bitcoin. And I also got it in the hands of these guys. I mean, I only took a few pictures. In total, I delivered like 500 of them last year by myself. It's like my own baby. I started it as a hobby, and now it's like a part-time job. And I want to thank the sponsors. There's Joshua from Voltoro and The Standard, and he was the first guy who supported my work, decided to sponsor my podcast. And at one point, I realized that he was sponsoring my podcast, and it was not really growing. And I was in a situation where I was thinking to hire someone to do marketing. But I was like, why don't I start a different project, which is going to also promote the podcast indirectly? And basically, the magazine is my marketing vehicle. I just gave you the insights from behind the curtains. But also want to thank from Ellen Bits Ben Ark, if he's here. He was on stage earlier. And also from Wasabi, there's Adam, and he always liked my work. We have been friends since 2019, and right now my podcast is sponsored by Wasabi and Voltoro, and I make money with the podcast, and then I spend it on magazines, which I give away for free. So that's how I operate. And Start9 Labs, they have a very nice operating system for Raspberry Pi. Trezor, Mallorca Blockchain Days, they printed 200 copies this year, and last year, I think Christian gave me like €100, which was nice because I printed more magazines. Bit refill, and that's it. So I paid my dues. This year I launched a new one before my 30th birthday. I like to think of this second magazine as like the best work of my 20s, because now I'm 30. I wrote it when I was 29. I think it's the most mature piece of work that I have done in terms of writing. And it contains articles which explain how Bitcoin works. And I actually wanted to start with a question, but I was taken aback. And the fact that I got rescheduled, I was supposed to talk at 4:30, and now it's 1 p.m. I mixed the data in my head. I wanted to ask you guys how you onboard new people to Bitcoin if they want to read something. Do you send them links? Do you buy them books? Do you get them something like Mastering Bitcoin or the Bitcoin Standard? What is the best way in which you get someone to get interested in Bitcoin? But do they watch them? That's what my question is. Yeah, that's a good way. You give them some money. Though in my experience, they don't care much, and they lose it. Or
not immediately, but maybe after 10 days or a month. What is this that you give?
yeah, in my experience, so this is like a story. I'm going to a wedding in 2 weeks. One of my university classmates is getting married, and I told her, I can give you this amount as a gift at the wedding, or I can give you twice as much in Bitcoin. And she was like, no, give me euro. Okay. You could have gotten twice as much, you could exchange it, but she didn't want to because she's afraid. And I've been thinking, okay, I created this magazine last year, and then I open sourced it. so that anyone can print their own copies. And that's the whole point of this presentation, that it should not rely on me as a single point of failure. The project is so much bigger. Anyone can take the information from GitHub. And the reason why I do a magazine as opposed to a book, because people have told me, okay, this is thick, I could write a book with this content. It's more graphical, it looks nicer. I've done different editions this year. This one is from Parallelnipolis at Pizza Day, which took place 2 months ago. And the ones that I send myself are signed and numbered. And the ones that anyone can print are open source. And I differentiate them by the cover. So every cover tells you which edition it is. This one from Mallorca Blockchain Days 2022 is a unique edition, and you should get it when you head out. And what I'm doing also, since it's an open source project, so this is the first edition. I did not bring this here, but I think I have like 70 of them left at home. I've decided to translate this into French and Spanish, and I'm going to open source that because I realize that most people who get these magazines already know what's inside, in the sense that they don't really need the education. They get it as a collectible. And I'm trying to move past that and really scale. And to do that, I need to get to the people who don't have any Bitcoin resources. In the English world, we created a lot of content for Bitcoin, but then we realized that it doesn't get through the other communities. And I realized in my own country, I come from Romania, which is close to Liberland, by the way. And yeah, we are neighbors of Serbia, so I should get easily to Liberland if I want. I realized that in Romania, there were shitcoins that translated memes about Bitcoin, and they promoted those memes for themselves, as in they made them. And people got exposed to ideas like store of value, generational wealth, and stuff like that. And they thought, oh, these guys are geniuses. They have reinvented money. But people who previously had no exposure to Bitcoin because of language barriers got scammed into buying into some shitcoin that has no future for it. It's just a bull market pump and dump. And then they're gonna be very disappointed and think that Bitcoin is the same. And I realized that we as educators have pretty much failed in the sense that we haven't been able to have this content translated in languages and promoted. So that's why I decided to work with 2 translators. This guy, his name is Gretoshi on Twitter. He did the French translation, and next month there's gonna be Surfing Bitcoin in France, which is a conference. And I'm going to have some magazines there. But actually the target audience for the French magazine is in North Africa, because that's where people don't really have access to Bitcoin resources. And I'm going to open source it so that they can print as many copies as they want for themselves. And I think I spoke with someone from Senegal and someone from Ghana, and they're going to print some magazines for their local communities. And I think that's the best way to use it. And there's also a Spanish edition that will be translated for adopting Bitcoin, which takes place in El Salvador. And the organizers agreed to print like 200 copies for El Salvador. I've also spoken with people from Guatemala, from Panama, from Chile, I think also Mexico, but I'm not very sure there. But they're going to promote the content to their local communities. And the reason why I use, yeah, I'm also going to mention the sponsors, but the reason why I use the magazine is that the articles are on different topics. For example, there is an article about a video game which has some Bitcoin ideas. And someone who's into video games is going to read that article and realize, okay, I have something in common with the Bitcoin culture. Because if you only focus on stuff that's interesting for Bitcoiners, you're only going to speak to a small echo chamber. With a magazine, you can approach different topics in a way that's not generating any kind of obligation to read everything. You find this on a coffee table, someone opens it, reads a random article that they like, they put it back, and at least they learn something about what Bitcoin is, as opposed to finding a book which creates the obligation to go from cover to cover to read. So I also need to thank all the sponsors who contributed to this: Voltero, Wasabi Wallet, Start9 Labs. This guy, Motorina Zero, actually gave me $200 just to have his name written on a blank page. just a white page and his name on it. And he was like, I'm gonna give you $200 for that. And I printed 20 magazines with that, so thank you. Ciprian and Mallorca Blockchain Days, any colo panties for Bitcoin. So in the middle of the magazine, I think it's page 70 or something, there's this very hot lady wearing panties. So if you are into Playboy stuff, I guess you're gonna like that. BitKippy, they're like an interface for Kraken, but a service that is KYC minimized for Europe, and they're based in Switzerland. Basically, they buy Bitcoin from Kraken and resell it from Switzerland with a small fee, but minimal KYC. You don't sign up with your ID, just they take your bank account and that's it, which I think is very smart. So no photo ID, no passport, no nothing. LN Bits, Ben is not here, but he does a great job. Bill Fuddle wallets, they're like a clone of Crypto Steel. Metal plates, if you want to store your seed on steel. Shift Crypto, even though I wanted that to be Trezor, but we'll talk on that later. And BTC Reserve, which is an exchange from Macedonia, I think. Anyway, former Serbia. And I also have upcoming editions for the rest of the year. As you can see, pretty much every month for the rest of the year, I'm going to release some edition. There's gonna be the French translation for next month, the Baltic Honey Badger special edition for Riga in September, the TabConf special edition. TabConf is a conference where the developers go in Atlanta, Georgia. The Spanish translation for adopting Bitcoin in El Salvador in November, and possibly also LaBitConf in Argentina. And I'm going to try to create an edition for every conference and meetup that requests it, even though, as I said, I have this at the end of the presentation. There's this QR code, you scan it if you want right now, and you're gonna get to the GitHub page where you download every page of the magazine, and you can even, like, if you don't like the ads, which I put in the magazine, you can remove them even if the sponsors don't like it, but you know, it's part of the open source project, and you create your own edition with the modifications that you want. If you don't like an article, you can not include it. And I spoke about this. How will I pay for all the magazines? With full ad pages and partnerships with the event organizers, as was the case with Mallorca, and thank you, Christopher. Not Christopher, Christian. Oh man, I screwed up. And donations, but that's not very reliable. Why bother with the magazines? And that's a very good question, because I haven't made any money with this. I spent everything that I made, and since I spent fiat and got Bitcoin back, I actually got wrecked with the bear market, so I don't think I'm doing so well right now. But magazines are easy to read and more friendly than books. They stir the curiosity because they have graphics, unlike books which are just text. And you have multiple perspectives and topics within the same edition, so you can find something that might interest you. They require no commitment, which means that you read one article and that's it, if you want, or you can read everything. And the market for magazines on the topic of Bitcoin is still very young. And now I'm gonna basically talk about this, which actually happened after I released the first Bitcoin Takeover magazine. So Bitcoin magazine got back into printing, and this was the first one that they did. And when I saw this, I got very angry, because this is what colonialism looks like, basically. You have these Americans who go into El Salvador, they take a picture of this guy, they put him on the cover. This guy has no idea what's going on. He did not receive any Bitcoin education from them. He's not able to read the magazine to understand what it's about. But they just went there, and I don't know. It's not like maybe they paid him. It's likely that they paid him, so that's what they did for him. But the magazine did not really help in this regard. And that's what made me a bit angry, and it made me decide to also have it translated to Spanish, which is gonna be ready in a couple of months, I hope. And there's also Citadel 21, which is a magazine about Bitcoiners. Oh, I wanted to say that I used to work for Bitcoin magazine, full disclosure, and I want to beat them. That's why I'm here. by the end of the year, I want to deliver more copies than they did. And I'm not happy that because when I was working at Bitcoin Magazine in 2019, it was mostly about explaining technical stuff in a way that anyone can understand. But now it's more about politics and social issues. They try to promote adoption in El Salvador. They try to take sides in politics. Their latest edition is about the Canadian protests. And that's noble in itself, in and of itself, but it's no longer about explaining how Bitcoin works, it's more about pushing an agenda. And that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to take it back to the origins of explaining what Bitcoin is to anyone, regardless of their political opinions. This basically is turning into an echo chamber kind of publication, which is only appealing to libertarians and people who agree with their worldview. But I want to do something that even a socialist can read and maybe ask some questions about what they believe about the world and if Bitcoin can provide to them something that they like. Because I think that every human being thinks about liberty with some limitations, and there's something that Bitcoin can provide to them. And as soon as they figure that out, that's how we get the real grassroots adoption, not the top-down one where a president decides to enable payments that are compulsory. You must accept BTC. And there's also Citadel 21, which is a project that I really like, but at the same time, I also dislike. I'm a subscriber. And their philosophy was that it's always going to cost $21, and with inflation, it means that they're going to reduce the quality of the print with each edition. The first one was okay, the one in the picture. But as more copies started to get delivered, I realized that they're only getting worse. And they're compromising too much with print quality. And they also have articles that are kind of echo chamber-ish. So most people who write for them basically tell their story about how they discovered Bitcoin. And if you read it as an alien who just landed on the planet, you're gonna think that it's more of a religious publication than something which teaches you something new. It's about these people who feel like Bitcoin solved all of their problems, and once everyone else discovers Bitcoin, the world is gonna be a better place because, you know, Bitcoin fixes everything and whatever. So this is why I don't really like the project. I like the initiative, but I don't necessarily agree with them. And I think that there's room for competition, which is why I'm doing my project. The next one, so I didn't tell you this, but I'm doing one magazine every year. This one, so let me take this back. This one, I made it look like a PlayStation 2 game. As you can see, I use the same font because I'm a nerd, and this is what I used to play when I was a kid. And the next one is going to have PlayStation 3 graphics. You can see that I stole the font. It's actually open source, but I did get inspired. And it's gonna get called Breaking FUD. And the concept behind this is that I'm going to take most misconceptions about Bitcoin and try to debunk it in one volume of 100 pages. And it's gonna be available next year, and I'm also going to open source it, just like the rest of the content. So if you want to print this, you can get it next year. I'm still writing it. And I'm gonna take over multiple battlefields because I still do the podcast. I'm at 125 episodes. I'm gonna write more articles. So look for Bitcoin Takeover podcast if you have Spotify. I'm gonna do more content in French and Spanish, more translations in more languages, hopefully. I need more funds for that. I don't know how I can scale. Grow audiences in multiple languages, explore the news reporting field, because I feel like news is also rigged, and I feel like companies from Europe and Asia and Africa get left out, and most of the news outlets are excessively American. If you look, you have Coinbase, not Coinbase, CoinDesk, you have the Cointelegraph, you have The Block, you have Bitcoin Magazine. Basically, most of them are in the US, and they report about US companies and VCs and startups and whatever. If you look at the amount of coverage that Strike, the wallet, gets in Bitcoin Magazine, you're gonna see that they have like 20 articles a year. If you look for Electrum or Raspberry Blitz or some open source project from Europe, you're gonna see that they barely get there. It takes some effort for them to get published. So I think there's potential in news reporting, and I'm going to try to do that, even though it's very resource intensive. So I only have 24 hours in a day, and about 10 in which I can work, but I'm gonna do my best. And I'm also gonna try to find a way to monetize without compromising on core principles, which is the biggest challenge, as everyone involved basically wants something from you, with the exception of Joshua and Adam. They were very nice to me. They never asked me for anything so far. So thank you.